welcome to another edition of Kev's Defender Project. Now in this episode we're going to be refurbishing the dashboard. The Land Rover is about 30 years old now, so the vinyl's faded and cracked in places. So what I'm going to attempt to do is recover the dashboard with leather. This is going to update the look and make it feel a little bit more comfortable inside. I've already taken the dashboard out, so we can get straight on with the refurbishing process. So let's go and take a look. This is the lower part of the dashboard. You can see the connectors here that go to the pipes for the vents that go by the windscreen. I've already taken a bunch of screws out. As you can see, they're pretty rusty, so I'll be replacing those. But the key thing here is that this plate now comes off. And again, as you can see, because it's quite old and rusty, the paint is just kind of flaking off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this up, respray it, put it all back together again. So next we're going to need to deal with the underside of the dashboard. Now I've already taken out the speaker and the flaps for the heater, but apart from those holes there's this hole here, which is something that a previous owner had. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all the vinyl off, we'll refoam it, we'll repaint the metal, and then we'll recover it. So as it turns out, the vinyl was only stuck around the edges, as you can see. It made it fairly easy to get off the metal shell itself. So now I've got my shell. Having a look at it, there's rust spots in places that I want to address, so I'll sand those down and repaint them. Once that's all prepared, then we can get the foam and the leather and we can start covering it. As you can see, this part is not in as good a condition as the other part. The paint's flaking off, there's a lot of rust on it, so we're really going to need to strip this back completely before we respray it. Now, this is a good excuse for me to buy a new toy. I've now got a shot blasting cabinet, so let's have a go. Well, as you can see, we're doing a pretty good job. You can see this is the side that's been blasted and this is the side that hasn't. So you can see it's doing a really good job of cleaning it up. So let's get back to it. So the sandblasting is finished now. I think we've got this looking quite nice. You can see there is some paint left inside, but it's really solid, so I think I'm just going to leave it. So the next thing to do is paint this. What we're going to do now is we're going to cover it with foam. So I've got this 6mm closed cell foam. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up and then draw a line around the front. So this will show us on the foam where we need to put the glue. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put the impact adhesive on the part here. So it's been a little bit more than half an hour. It's actually been about 3 hours, but basically it is now touch dry. So let's line it up. Now obviously it doesn't matter too much if this is misaligned, but the better we line it up, the less we've got to trim off later on. So we'll just give that a good press down. And that's now stuck on. Next step is to build up this piece up around the front, which is then going to curve around there like that. I'm going to fold this round flat at the top, and then I'm going to mark it with the pen as to where that line's probably going to be, and also where it's going to stay flat to about there. So we can then join that line up. So what I'll do is I'll cut along there, glue this piece, and then we'll fold that round. Then this piece underneath will fold up, and then we can cut the gap out in the middle. Done. So next we need to cut this piece round here. That's going to fit in there nicely like that once it's glued, and once the leather's on, you never see the joint. So now we're going to start covering the first part with the leather. Interesting thing to note about this leather is that it stretches further in one direction than it does in the other direction. Now I'm thinking for this part I'm going to want the stretching to go up and down. I'm going to rotate through 90 degrees before we start planning what we're going to do. So I think what we're going to need to do is take it fairly close to this edge, and then we've got enough to wrap up around here and plenty around the bottom. I'm going to mark out a small section. We're not putting the impact adhesive in too many places, so we're not getting lumps underneath when it dries and we've not used it. And to make a nice strip down the middle that we've coated. I'm going to do the same on the part itself. So as before, we need to leave that to dry for a little while, so I'll be back in a minute. So both of these parts are touch dry now, so we can line them up again and stick them back together. So I think the next piece we're going to do is the easy bit, might as well. So we're just going to finish doing this part here, up to this edge. We'll just fold it over. And the next piece is going to be fun because it's the curvy bit, so it's going to have to come up round here. But if we were to just pull it up like that, it's going to wrinkle as it goes around like that. So I'm going to try and pull it around like that. Make sure we don't get any wrinkles in it. We'll draw around it. I'm going to glue it enough so that we're going to be able to cover this whole thing. Yeah, I think that's going to work. Come back when I've glued it and we'll have another look. Okay, so this is going to be the fun bit. Now, wish me luck. Unfortunately, my memory card ran out, so you're going to have to wait until the final reveal to see the finished cover. Here you can see me removing the vinyl from the crash bar. Now this is completely stuck to the foam underneath, but with a bit of patience and a Stanley knife, I managed to get it all off. Now here you can see in the middle, this is the hole for the ashtray. Now I don't want the ashtray anymore, so what I'm going to try and do is use this expanding foam to fill the hole. I'm going to sand it down flush and then cover it. So let's see how that goes. So the first job is to cover the opening with tape so that the foam doesn't just fall through. After that, it's just a simple matter of spraying the foam, smoothing it into the corners and letting it expand and set. So this is the top bar that we had the expanding foam in. As you can see, it's swelled up quite big, but we can start trimming it down now. So I'm going to take off the tape that we used to cover the back and then start cutting off a lot of the excess. Okay, so we're nearly down to the original surface shape, so we'll just trim some of this off with this. Last thing I'm going to do is just block it with some sandpaper. So this is 80 grit, so we'll just sand it down. So you can now see that that is perfectly smooth to the original shape. Don't know if you can see that down there. That's perfect. So now that that's filled in, we can go ahead and cover this with the leather.
So now we're going to move on to the hardest part probably, which is the main part of the dashboard. So I've covered it in foam, as you can see. I've cut all the relevant holes out, including the speaker and the air ducts. Now the tricky bit's going to be when I want to stitch around this plate. I'm going to bolt this back on and draw around it. So what I really want to do is cut a piece for the main dashboard. I'm going to cut a separate piece at the top and put stitching at the bottom and at the top. Try and make it look nice. Now I've seen a few videos on YouTube, but I don't know how it's going to turn out when I do it. And also, because this corner is going to be quite tricky, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put another seam here and then stitch down both sides of it and see how we get on.
Now what you're seeing here is a process called shiving. Now a shiving tool like the one here can be bought for a few pounds online, and what it allows you to do is shave the back of the leather to make it thinner, so that when it's folded over behind the seam it's the same thickness as the rest of the leather and there's no visible bump. Once both pieces of leather that you're sewing together has been thinned, it's time to join them together temporarily so they can be stitched. The easiest way to do this once you've lined them up is to staple them together. Now we can stitch the two pieces together. I borrowed my mother-in-law's sewing machine for this. Make sure you get proper leather needles. Ordinary needles aren't up to the job, and again these can be bought cheaply online. I also use bonded nylon sewing thread rather than ordinary cotton, because as far as I can tell this is what's normally used on car upholstery. I got size 40 and it looks about the same as what I've seen on real cars. Once you've sewn the two pieces together you can remove the staples, flatten the seam down, and then glue the back of the seam flat. Now it's time for the detail stitching. I just replaced the top thread with the white one and then ran a seam either side of the seam that joins the two pieces together. This both looks good and also aids the glue in keeping the folded parts on the reverse side in place. Finally, we stick the leather to the dashboard, making sure that all detail stitching is in the right place. So all the dashboard parts are covered now. You can see the stitching's come out quite nicely. The last step is to just cut all the holes out again and refit all the parts. So there's just a couple of little jobs left to do before we can put our refurbished dashboard back on. The first one was to give the bulkhead a bit of a clean. I know nobody's going to see it, but now I'm going to know that behind all my nice dashboard it's clean. The other one is there was some kind of cork seal around this hole that goes into the heater. So you can buy them, the part numbers are on the Defender parts catalogue, but because I've got some double-sided sticky tape and some faux rubber left over from when I was doing the dashboard, I figured I'd just measure it out and save myself a bit of money. So once we've lined this up, giving it a nice firm press on, we're now ready to put the dashboard back on. Okay, so first job is to put the first heater duct back on the bottom of the dashboard. So we need to make sure all the wires are out the way. And of course speaker wire as well, possibly the most important part of the car. So now the wires are all in the right place. There are
two fixings that this thing kind of hangs off. They're machine screws, and then once those are done, you've just got a few screws that tidy up, hold the rest of the dashboard up. So, it's all put back together. You can see it looks pretty nice. Well, I think so anyway. Not bad considering it cost me about 30 quid for the leather and about another tenner for the foam rubber. And I've got about half of it left that I can use on something else. Now, some of you will have noticed that the instrument binnacle and the cover for the steering column still aren't back on yet. Now, that's because I'm going to split this into two parts. Part one was covering the main dash with the leather, and part two is a quite natty replacement I've got for the instrument binnacle. So, as I've said before, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. The link should be appearing any minute now. Subscribe to my channel, share it on any sites that you subscribe to that you think people might like it, and I'll see you very shortly for part two.